So, Eric, how are you today, man?
I'm feeling fantastic. How you doing,
I've
LJ?
never had it so good, dude, and I'm stoked to be here on your farm today. So tell me a little bit, what is Alegria Fresh?
Well, Alegria Fresh is kind of a crazy idea that started about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it was all about pushing the limits of efficiencies. It's the West Coast's first hydroponic vertical farm. As you can see, we're surrounded by towers of lettuce and arugula and chard. You just name it, anything grows here. We're pushing limits in many areas, such as water. We use about 95% less water. I'm going to cut back on that. We're pushing the limits of efficiencies in many ways. We use 90% less water, 50% less fertilizer, about 70% less land, and zero toxic pesticides. And we produce food that's about 7 times more nutrition rich than any other food you can buy at the market. And it's really not a fair fight, because the food you get in the supermarket is 4 to 5 days old, and that's really the inherent problem with the distribution system for Big Ag. Now, I'm not ragging on Big Ag, but they're trying to feed everybody they can. But the difference is we really need to find solutions for the urban environment. So this is my guerrilla high-performance urban ag model.
Right on. And tell me, why do you use this farming system?
Well, it's a patented system by Vertigro, and we're developing other systems there. It's called a hydroponic drip system. Everything is grown hydroponically in coconut fiber, basically, which is soilless. So we've pioneered the idea of growing high-density vegetables, microgreens, and greens in a hydroponic solution. Let me back up a second. We've pioneered the idea, we pioneered the concept of developing super high-performance urban agriculture using a hydroponic drip system.
Okay, awesome. And tell me a little bit about how that works. I noticed that these vertical towers are set up, and basically, if I'm understanding correctly, the drip runs off through the first pot into the second, the corresponding pots all the way down.
Yeah, and that's really where the water efficiency comes in. It actually drips off the top tube there, and it drips it through a little micro emitter. And we set our timers just enough so that it drips into the bottom pot. Now, I've designed a little bit larger bottom pot. I use a 5-gallon bottom pot to grow all these big, beautiful kales and everything else, so I kind of get a free crop on the bottom.
Eric, in your mind, what are the problems associated with the current food distribution system?
Well, the biggest one is the distance from where the goods are grown to where they're actually delivered and consumed. Most farmers markets in Orange County, for example, don't have any produce that's locally grown. I, at this moment, am the only locally grown commercial farm that's offering, seriously, a couple miles away, locally grown vegetables in Laguna Beach. Most of it comes from the Central Valley, Fresno, Southern California, down in San Diego. And what happens is that the inherent problem is you've got carbon footprint, transportation costs associated with oil. You've also got the time it takes from when it's harvested to the time it's actually consumed, and that averages 4 to 5 days in most supermarkets.
Eric, in your mind, what are the problems with the current food distribution system?
Well, it's really the distance from where the food is grown to where it's actually consumed, and that is the biggest problem. It takes, on average, 4 to 5 days to get from fields, for example, in Fresno, Northern California, or even San Diego or Mexico, to supermarkets around here. And most lettuce, most greens, which are really fine leaves, are actually dead or half dead after 3 days. They lose 50% of their vitamin C. So the biggest problem is you're using oil, increasing your carbon footprint to transport vegetables over long distances, and by the time they get here, they're half as good as they should be.
As far as the nutritional value and
Yeah.
what you're uptaking. And then furthermore, I understand that cooking it removes even more of the vitamin potential out of the
Well, yeah, that's a whole other subject, but yeah, you can overcook raw vegetables. And when you get into nutrition, consuming raw vegetables as close to the time of harvest is critical. Our lettuce, for example, is on average 7 to 10 times more potent, which is nutrient rich, than any lettuce you can get in town, because it's not really a fair fight. Theirs 4 to 5 days old, and I'm picking mine at the last second.
and the flavors too. Can
Yeah,
you tell me? I was blown away by some of the flavors that you had in this garden. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's really where it all, where I say the rubber hits the road, so to speak. If you taste these vegetables, you're convinced. I can talk all day, tell you how, what's in it biochemically, etc., and it won't make any difference until all of a sudden you taste them. And if you think you know what cilantro is supposed to taste like, come in here and taste it. If you think arugula is powerful, taste our arugula. When a plant is absorbing really well and it's very, very fresh and it's got a lot of nutrients in it, it's very pungent. And so that's what I'm trying to teach people, is how to select vegetables based on how powerful they taste. And so we have kind of the demonstration farm here on what stuff's supposed to taste like.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible the difference. I mean, when you're used to store-bought lettuce like I am, and then you step into some of this stuff, the flavors can almost be overwhelming, you know? It's like you don't even want to add dressing to a salad because there's so many big flavors present. You just don't need it, and that's never been my experience in the past till I met you. So I think this is totally incredible, and everybody should check it out. Now,
I have a little story to tell you real quick, because
please do.
it really lends credence to what you said. One of the things I'm really interested in is reconnecting youth and people to their food supply. Back in the 40s and 50s, half of Americans basically grew their own food because they had to. And so that was a very healthy food supply. Most Americans were eating locally grown food. But in the last 60, 70 years, we've gotten completely away from that. And you start seeing things like kids getting diabetes and early onset diabetes, and they're all suffering from obesity at 16, 17 years old. And some of the early onset diabetes is happening as early as 13 years old.
Jeez.
It's insane. It's all diet. So my overriding goal here was to teach people how to grow their own food in very fresh, high performance fashion, very resource efficient, and have parents be able to reconnect their kids, not to their iPhone, but to the food, the salad that they might eat. My brother's kids actually came in here and they swear they don't eat salad. And after a half an hour, I watched them walking around. I think there must be like a grazing gene or something, because they started picking lettuce out of here, and all of a sudden, Uncle Eric, what's this? What else can I eat? This tastes really good. And when that happened, the lights went on.
Yeah.
And so we've actually started teaching classes with daughters, mothers, and sons. It's very female, kind of a nurturing energy here.
Yeah.
And they're very interested in what their kids eat. So that is really what is one of my big focuses now, on how do we introduce our kids to this. We got to create more farmers, and so that these kids will know where their food comes from.
You had also mentioned that you were highly interested in doing it in urban atmospheres because that's where the greatest need of the fresh food is, and it seems to be where it's most efficient. And that was the concept on this farm. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yeah, it's pretty well known that in big ag you have to have 1,000 acres to produce enough food to make it profitable. And I was always, if you're going to try to make try to influence a paradigm shift in the way we view our food and the way we grow our food, you have to come up with a profitable, or what I call a sustainable business model. And so what I decided to do was to see if I could build a 1,200-foot enclosure and put enough plants in there and develop enough revenue centers, such as a produce route. I mean, we deliver about 50 bouquets of lettuce a week now to very upscale and affluent clients in Laguna Beach, which picked at 3:30 and put on their doorstep at 4:30.
Incredible.
And we're using that to actually, these people have no time, they're busier than heck, they're all out making money, and the last thing they want to do is grow their own food, but they do understand what nutritious food's about. So by us delivering a bouquet like that directly to them, they can taste the difference. So that's one model. The other model is actually building other farms. I mean, you can see that big ag usually takes 1,000 acres to make it profitable. We're actually in about 1,200 square feet here, and normally, if you look at traditional urban agriculture, that would feed one person. We're actually able to feed 50 out of this space.
Wow.
And there's a whole bunch of factors that lend to that because of how fast the food grows, and basically because of the vertical production, I'm actually growing 6 to 7 times the food just by every layer of pot I go up. So if I've got 8 pots, I'm growing 8 times. That's my starting point. If the food grows 2.5 times faster,
that's another big
there's
win,
a big factor, and my yields are going way up.
Yeah,
And
because
if
of
I'm
hydroponic delivery.
Right, and if I'm growing, roughly 10 times more, then you can see that in a very small space, you can produce a heck of a lot more food for a lot of people. So I would love to see, one of these farms every 3 miles or every 2 miles.
I'd love to see them in dense places like Chicago, where, there's a lot of poor people that kind of, it seems like I walked into a supermarket recently in San Bernardino, which is a little less affluent than Laguna Beach, if you will, and I noticed that there was just an overwhelming amount of soda displays and
Right.
sugary cereals, and I mean, way off over yonder was some fruit and vegetables. But it seems like they were advertising almost these horrible foods directly to these people.
Well,
And I'd just love to see this type of thing in Chicago and Detroit, where
yeah,
people could really get turned on to healthy foods and whatnot.
you've just hit on a really important subject, and I don't think it's the big chains that are trying to stay out of marginalized areas. There's a lot of incentives. Our federal government is starting to provide tremendous incentives to put more fresh food into these marginalized, what Michelle Obama refers to as food deserts. Places you're talking about, San Bernardino, Rancho Cucamonga, Ontario, and the city of San Bernardino are 3 declared food deserts. We have Santa Ana, which is 10 minutes away from here, and these are very large, urban areas full of very affluent people, but also a very big marginalized population that don't have access to this fresh food. So, yes, this is a solution. I mean, you could actually put 1,000-square-foot farms in parking lots.
Yeah.
I don't need soil. I don't need ground. I mean, I grow up. I can actually, put these towers right on top of asphalt and be just as happy. In fact, the heat coming off the asphalt will even
Help
benefit
your
the
root
crop.
system.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's going.
Yeah, so it does lend itself really, really well in the urban environment. And once again, I don't think it'll replace traditional agriculture, because you can't grow everything in here. You're not going to grow a citrus tree in a pot.
Yeah.
But when it comes to high power nutrition, these greens, these powerful greens like these green and red romaines and all these herbs that we're growing, which I call medicinal herbs, I mean, we basically are creating a fantastic green pharmacy, and that's pharmacy with an F-A-R-M-A-C-Y.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And if you understand, food and how it works, you can't get cancer eating in a place like this.
Yeah, and actually fight cancer, from what I understand, fight diabetes and heart
Absolutely.
disease, and there was like 74 other things that a raw plant food diet will just wipe out. Shocking.
Yeah, if you look around you here, I'm letting a lot of the flowers here grow, because not only is it's a biodynamic form of farming, it actually brings in the bees, but flowers are one of the most nutritious parts of the plant. This is a broccoli flower here. This is a arugula flower. This is a kale flower. And these are absolutely delicious. And when a plant flowers, you can imagine it's putting all its energy into that flower. So one of the things we do is we actually pack our bouquets with flowers. Produce bouquet should have flowers in it. And we're starting to teach people how important it is to actually eat the flowers.
Yeah, you gave me a couple. They were pretty tasty.
Yeah, like, the broccoli head is a flower that is beginning that hasn't yet flowered. Behind you is a broccoli that's flowering. There's a bunch of broccoli, all these yellow flowers that are actually the head of the broccoli that's just been let go for 2 more weeks or so, and it's flowering. And those are just incredibly nutritious to eat.
I've only heard of a few guys doing what you're doing and setting up big, either hydroponic or otherwise, or greenhouses in heavily urban areas, and like trying to feed the people and come out with that education as well to like get these kids away from this diabetes and the obesity epidemic, if you will. Like, I just think it's spectacular what you're doing. Tell me, how'd you end up into this? Like, what was the inspiration that you wanted to create superfood and help people and kind of take your stance against what was going on?
Well, like, the motivator is actually, it's not like I say, and everybody we all want to say, yeah, we're going up against Monsanto and we're going up against Big Ag. That's just a joke, because that's impossible. What I'm trying to do is offer a very healthy alternative. And once again, where Big Ag cannot be profitable, where people really need it the most. What inspired me was, for 25, 30 years, backing up even farther than that, my mother is pretty much a nutritionist. She graduated from a very good university in Denmark, and she was always taught to eat raw, fresh food. She brought us up on that. We didn't have Cokes, we didn't have all this high sugar stuff to eat. It just wasn't around the house. Would we eat chocolate? Yeah, we're Danish. My grandfather's a conditor. We ate chocolate like it went out of style. But that was pretty much a limitation on our sugars. Otherwise, my mom taught us that food is medicine, and it stuck. So back in '81, when I was graduating, I was pre-med, and I graduated with a background in biochemistry and oncology. I was really turned off by the pharmacology end of the business. I thought, why is everybody popping a pill when I can eat that food and get more nutrition straight from the food? So I started a car company. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. I took a hobby that I had there, an automotive design company, started that. Then I started a marketing and sales company and ran around Baja and Australia, New Zealand, and Bora Bora for about 4 or 5 years, developing plans to help developers go green. And I kind of circled back. In 2008, my world fell off the cliff. No one was selling real estate. No one cared about it. And all of a sudden I said, wow, it's time to become the chameleon and change my colors again. And I thought, what do I want to do? And like I said, when I saw my brother's kids eating off towers, I thought, wow, that could really create a paradigm shift. And then I thought to myself, how bad is it needed? I started doing more research, and I said, it's never been needed more than now.
Yeah.
I mean, we're so disconnected from our food supply.
It's incredible.
And, I bring people in here, and they don't even know what broccoli looks like unless it's cut. I ask kids, where does their food come from? They say from the store. And I say, no, from farms. They don't even know anymore. They can sure text and they can play baseball, but they have no clue where their food's coming from. So I looked at that and said, it's not going to be easy, because there's first we're going to have to teach people what vertical is. Then we're going to have to teach them what hydroponic is. Then we're going to have to show them the difference in the food. So there's a lot of education that's got to happen. But what's been really, I'd say, inspiring for me is every time I was hitting a hiccup here and saying, boy, I really need something, and I poured most of my savings into this thing over the last 4 years, I've just called in the greatest people. I mean, you included. You've become a really great friend, and you didn't eat like this when I met you.
No, I didn't.
And I'm having more fun, showing you how to eat and eat this kind of food and teaching you about it, and it's really getting contagious.
Let me ask you, is there a certain hero of yours or one man that's inspired you to go a little further with this thing? Or
Absolutely. Well, there's two really. I was fascinated with Dixon Despommier, who is known as the father of vertical farming. And I think it was back in the late 90s, he had a class, and he basically challenged the class to come up with something world-beating. And they ended up coming up with a concept of growing up and not out. So vertical farming kind of got a hold. He has now become the father of, quote, the vertical farm, and he preaches all over the world, how we might in the near future and within 20, 30 years, in order to feed this burgeoning population, how we might use skyscrapers to actually have farms in the urban environment.
Wow.
It seems far-fetched, but I have a feeling it's going to happen. The other guy that really inspired me was a guy named Will Allen. He's started a company called Growing Power back in the mid-90s. He's a black baseball player, big hulk of a guy, and he bought a farm and had a farming background, and a bunch of kids started showing up, very underprivileged, marginalized kids started showing up at his farm, and he says, what do you guys want to do? And he didn't think these kids wanted to work, but lo and behold, all of a sudden this little black team of farmers starts cropping up, and he starts teaching them all about urban agriculture. And it caught on, and it's back in Chicago and Milwaukee that this thing has really taken foot. So I credit Will Allen to actually the idea that I came up with out here of actually developing a produce route instead of a paper route. I thought, well, maybe kids, can start delivering produce that they grow instead of delivering papers. And, I give him a lot of credit because he's slugged it out for 15 years. I think he got the MacArthur Foundation Award for one of the best ideas, and he's becoming very well known, and he deserves every bit of it. He's really a leader. So I would say that Will Allen was one of my those characters that really inspired me to get going, get off my duff, and make it happen.
I didn't. When I asked you that question a few minutes ago involving Chicago and Detroit, I couldn't remember which city, but it was that guy I was talking about. I saw a documentary with him as well, and I was moved. I mean, it's powerful stuff that these kids he's pulling out of. Some of the kids were leaning towards gang stuff, and now instead they're feeding their whole community and participating in such a major way to help. And it just takes one strong guy with the good heart and the right idea, and suddenly, it's like everybody flocks
one strong
into
guy
it.
and 100 strong lieutenants.
Well, that's it. I mean, these kids all show up willing to work. It's like you come up with this great plan and how to help, and then suddenly here come a bunch of helpers. I think it's marvelous how that sort of thing happens and triggers.
I got a couple of those guys on the farm right here. This is Brent. Also, when he's really on fire, we call him Bruno, and when he's really on fire, we call him Brunissimo.
Oh.
And this is Dwayne.
So tell me, what got you guys involved in this? What's your most exciting parts with this whole farm? What keeps you doing it every day?
It's just easy to believe in. It's such an easy concept. Good local food real simple, real easy to get my mind around.
Yeah,
that.
right?
I like that.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. It's really cool. I see the potential in the towers and everything for urban farming, and just the proof is there, just how they grow. They just do great.
Yeah, in such a small space too, so much
Right.
production. You guys were saying 9,000 plants, correct?
Yeah, 9,000 plants in
On
less than
1,200 square
Yeah,
feet.
we're actually, if you count everything, about 9,000 plants in 1,500 square feet.
Okay, still,
So,
that's incredible.
Yeah, we can easily average 6 to 7 plants per square foot. And
Wow.
I have actually maxed it out at about 10, but that's a little crazy.
Okay,
Then you
okay.
can't walk anymore. You're walking through walls of
Yeah,
of
vegetation.
lettuce. Yeah. You need a machete to
through,
get through
yeah,
that.
right.
The point is, they would grow that dense, though. That's the thing.
Incredible, incredible.
What do
So-
you guys? Where do you guys think is the future? I mean, I've thought about this for years. You guys are relatively new. Do you think this thing has a future? Do you think that it's needed?
Absolutely.
I understand they're not making real estate anymore, so
Yeah, right.
That's true.
it just makes sense. This is certainly on the horizon. Whether it's tomorrow, I don't know, but it's certainly coming.
Right on. Dwayne has been in a research environment for 15 years.
It's like you worked in a lab for 15 years,
Yeah.
correct?
Right.
And he obviously has his heart in here because I can't burn him out. I can't bury either one of these guys. Dwayne's relatively new, but Dwayne's got a construction background and everything else. And he told me the other day that this kind of farming actually involves all your skill sets. I mean, it involves biology, chemistry, construction, hydrology. We're feeding plants with plumbing systems. And so for us to be able to teach a kid how to build a farm actually teaches him how to be self-reliant and capable. Everything that takes to build this farm is what you need throughout life to be self-reliant. So I mean, I'm not a fatalist. I mean, I don't think that the world's coming to an end, but I'm all about having youth start learning more, taking advantage of different skill sets so they become more productive people.
I think it's also, there's something so rewarding about like growing your first plant and watching it get big and healthy, and you're just like rooting for it. Go, go, go. It's like, it's an exciting thing. And I feel like if everybody just got a taste of that, I mean, for me, when growing, I feel like I'm doing the purest form of God's work. I'm assisting life, It's like nobody got hurt. Nobody lost their home, I grew a plant. It was, like.
Well, we spent 200 years really abusing the soil on this planet.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's really two, in my opinion, two limiting reagents. One is soil, one is water. We got plenty of oil, even though everybody wants to make you believe you're running out of oil. You can't eat oil, even though we are eating a lot of it nowadays with the way the food supply is set up. Doing it this way, you don't eat any oil.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, this vertigrow system is good, but it's using a foam pot. It's really good in a very cold climate where you need insulation, but we've now moved into a fully recyclable polypropylene pot, multiple colors, so that these things look gorgeous. In fact, we have some gardens out here we can show you where we're using this new pot system that not only works better, but it's beautiful. And I think as we move towards beautifying the environment and making all of the gardens edible, there's so many plants that are gorgeous that are edible. What people are going to start realizing, there's no reason to start planting ornamentals anymore.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you water something, you want to eat it. And so that alone is going to be another paradigm shift in the way architects and landscape architects design homes. Not only from the energy efficiency, but to all the landscaping.
I heard that they were actually designing, some of the newer home builders were actually implementing little indoor garden spaces and little outdoor
growing walls. I mean, edible walls are.
It's just so interesting that, I mean, again, the movement. I mean, people are starting to realize, and it's really happening it's an exciting time.
Yeah, really, you're only limited by your imagination. I mean, there's so many positive tentacles to this business. I mean, we just did a big restaurant event where we actually kind of made a crossover dinner. My girlfriend and I are both raw chefs, even though I'm not a raw or a vegan. I'm an omnivore. I mean, being a Viking and all, I've got to have my bison and my venison every once in a while, but in small quantities, and my cheese and my good wines. However, it's important to cross over and start teaching people how to eat more plant-based foods. And so we're even designing menus now that allow people to eat some of the stuff they really love, but 80% of the stuff they're not used to eating, and showing them how to produce beautiful tasting food out of these vegetables.
I love that mayonnaise that you make. That
Oh, yeah.
macadamia and that mayonnaise.
Yeah,
God,
that
it's
macadamia
incredible.
mayonnaise is incredible.
Yeah, that stuff. Wow.
And we're attracting wonderful raw chefs to our team. We've got holistic healers. I've got a guy named Dr. Dave Williams. He's the one of the top, I would say, holistic healers out at Loma Linda University Medical
Incredible.
Center. He's his mandate is to actually help Loma Linda to bring in more preventative maintenance types ideas to their hospital, which is what Seventh-day Adventists believe in. So he's pioneering this healthy, safe food eating movement, and he joined our team right off the bat. He loves what we're doing.
Yeah.
Tana Amon, and she just finished her 5th book called The Omni Diet, which we believe is absolutely on the mark as far as eating. Her husband, Dr. Daniel Amon, I think he's got 30 books out on neurochemistry, brain chemistry, and he discusses all the different ways this food helps the brain stay healthy. So we're not alone. We got an army of millions out there that are really, really hungry for the information. And I think, for me, one of the most important things is to create a very friendly environment where people can learn how to grow food successfully, how to do it very resource efficiently, and how to pick the right food so they get the most nutrition.
Awesome. Awesome.